Wait. Okay.
Welcome to CVine News. I'm Linda Forsythe, and I'm coming here with a great deal of excitement because it was something very different. The Department of Defense had decided to use people only from alternative media to be able to cover the military tribunals from GITMO. And that's huge. The military tribunals are going to be covering 5 individuals all at once. And these 5 individuals, well, it's called actually through the Department of Defense, the Khalid Sheikh Mohammed et al., meaning that et al., there are a total of 5 individuals that are being tried all at once in the military tribunals, starting on January 28th, 2019, which started on this last Monday. It's interesting that when this started, that this is at the same time that a lot of 50 degrees plus below zero is going on with the weather in a lot of the Midwest. Right now, I am Linda Forsythe, and I am here in Washington, D.C. with
Leonard Bacani.
And we were here. We were agreed to be able to cover the military tribunals at Fort Meade in Maryland, which is right next to Washington, D.C. So it's really been an exciting time for us. We were the understanding that mainstream media would not be covering these proceedings. And so our initial thoughts were, well, this is great, because of all the things that are going on with the mainstream media of, Trump not going out of his way to answer questions at the White House with the mainstream media and etc. And then we find out that they're looking for alternative media only to cover the military tribunal. So, hey, we were excited. And then we find out, as we looked at the military tribunals and watched them along with looking at the transcriptions of the military tribunals, there's a little bit more involved. And with that being said, as you will find out, we're just going to be very simply, for the time being, going over the main points for everyone to look at. We have, through CVine News, have posted the entire military tribunal transcripts for we the people to be able to look at every single word that was said and what has gone through within there. But with that being said, we're just going over the main parts. Some of them may appear to be mundane, but please bear with us because some of those mundane points may be of importance later. So, going over the very beginning of the military tribunals, which started on January 28th, 2019, which was the pre-trial proceedings for the military tribunals at Guantanamo Bay, commenced with the military court judge Perella, who resided. Now, all of the military tribunals were live streamed to various different places around the United States with a 40-second delay. This is including actually in the room of the military tribunals in Guantanamo Bay, always a 40-second delay, to make certain that there weren't any secret information that got through within the military tribunals. And so we had to wait for the Department of Defense to come through with these transcriptions before we could come through to you. Now, we were really excited when we saw some of the things that were said in there, and it was kind of eye-opening. With that being said, let's move forward here. They start out with a little bit of the mundane, which is the session was called to order at 0911 Cuba Standard Time. Now, we want you to take note at this time for future reference. For those of you that are Q followers, there's a little bit of gematria going on here, and we will be discussing that. There will be a number of other times and dates that will be of interest for Q followers to be able to take a look at, and we will be covering those. But for the time being, we have the actual transcripts of the military tribunals that are posted not only on our website, but we're going to be posting the PDF files also on our Facebook page, which is where we, the people, are discussing, arguing, and coming through with our own determinations of what it is that we are reading. So you may want to go to Facebook and become a member of our group there.
Want to give them the website?
Well, the website is cvine.com. That's c-vine.com. And that is where we are going to be having the actual report of what it is what we're doing right now that is coming onto the actual website. But what we are also doing is putting the PDF file on our Facebook page just in case that website address doesn't come through, what we are going to be posting with all the information involved. So it's going to be in a couple of different places. Now, when we start out with all defendants are present in the first morning with their defense counsel, that's all fine and dandy. One of the defense counsel for defendant at Belushi, Captain Andrew, was sick and did not appear. Defense counsel Mr. Connell was in attendance to represent the defendants in his stead. Representing the United States were 7 attorneys, 2 paralegals, and 2 special agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigations. Brigadier General Martins advised that these proceedings were being transmitted via CCTV to locations in the continental United States pursuant to the Commission's order. The judge advised the defendants that they were free to be present if they chose, but they also could choose not to be present in the courtroom. But they were also advised that either way it must be of their own free will, but warned them that any potential absence could be detrimental in their ability to collaborate with the defense counsel. The judge asked each defendant individually if they understand their rights. And each defendant, of course, said yes. However, bin al-Shabi, speaking in English, responded, "As I told you last time, I cannot answer your questions because you are not qualified, Judge, for this case. Thank you," or thanks. The judge addressed bin al-Shabi, concerned that while counsel is free to challenge the judge's qualifications to preside over the commission, Mr. bin al-Shabi is not. So bin al-Shabi's unwillingness to recognize the judge as the presiding authority of the commission caused him some concern that he was going to be able to adhere to the commission. And that in turn would potentially put everyone's safety in the courtroom in jeopardy. So I'm going to stop right there for a second and discuss this with Leonard. It's like, why would that be a threat to the safety of the individuals within the courtroom?
Well, it goes to a person's ability to if they're not cooperating with the judge's orders and not being compliant, it could be argued that if he's not cooperating or agreeing to things going along with the program in this matter, there could be a chance that he may, in future proceedings or at a later time or a later date, that he could be uncooperative. So that obviously poses a security question, and he wants the judge is in charge of his courtroom, and he wants to make sure that all personnel within that courtroom is safe.
Well, that makes sense, but except when you look at the fact that we are talking about 5 individuals that in one way, shape, or form or another had orchestrated this horrific event on 9/11, 2001, that killed thousands of people. Right. So, the safety issue to me is, well, there's a safety issue with these individuals involved. And
Right.
at this point in period of time, to be concerned because of this one statement about the safety issues of the people in the courtroom, was it because they were not shackled, or what do you think it was?
No, I just think that as a matter of procedure, that the judge is the person in control. He controls all the personnel and makes all the decisions. One observation that I made is that the military judge is a colonel in rank, but one of the defense attorneys is a brigadier general, which is obviously a higher rank than the colonel rank, and as far as military structure. However, since the military judge is a colonel, he commanded that courtroom, and it was obviously a brigadier general who was outranks him in the military rank, was subservient to the colonel judge, and the general repeatedly referred to the judge as Your Honor, so he's respectful and obviously subservient. But the judge commanded that courtroom.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was obvious that that was the case. So that really wasn't a concern. Now, when we go through the various different bullet points, that the reason we are mentioning this, as we discussed before, we are making these transcriptions of the first day and the second day in another video available to you, that we strongly recommend you take the time to read through every little bit of it. All we're doing right here is bringing up some points of interest to maybe take a little bit of extra time. But those other things that we are not mentioning here are also of very much deep importance. There isn't anything that we particularly say one way or another that should be adhered to. This is all open for discussion. We're just bringing you the transcriptions of the actual trial. Now, with that being said, the judge advised the defendants they were free to be present. If they chose not to be present, that was fine also. It's interesting to see that this was brought up, because you are going to find, as you read through the transcriptions, that there are multiple times here in the future that they are trying very hard to close these proceedings. Now, that in and of itself is why I brought this up at the beginning, of why I was so excited. Oh, gee, alternative media is going to be the ones that are going to be covering these tribunals. But then again, as you look forward, as they were trying so hard, as you will see, to close these proceedings, it kind of makes you wonder, and this is just an opinion, but it kind of makes you wonder if mainstream media was just adding a type of proverbial insurance in case they did not close the proceedings. And without mainstream media covering it, and then they have the little guys like us who are simply citizen journalists through alternative media that are covering this, that really takes away from our credibility, because really, who are we? Well, we're not going to play that game. That's why we are giving you the actual transcripts, and we are going to be discussing these transcripts, and that's why it is so important that you take the time to do this. Now, moving forward, and the judge said much more after that. He advised that the judge asked each defendant individually if they understood their rights, and each defendant said yes. But bin al-Shabi spoke in English, responded, "As I told you last time, I cannot answer your questions because you are not qualified for a judge for this case. Thanks." And then move forward. So again, they are trying to discredit in any way, shape, or form. Now, the judge did respond, interestingly enough, to bin al-Shabi, that while his concern in counsel in the past, the counsel is free to challenge the judge's qualifications to preside over the commissions, Mr. bin al-Shabi is not qualified. So,
not qualified, but he had no standing. He had, in other words, the judge was saying he had no say in whether he can challenge the judge's qualification.
That's very true. So pretty much shut him down in that respect. What really became of interest, which is what we are going to be discussing briefly here and in the future, and I will bring it up here on the Facebook page for Seavine News, International News, on the group page. We are all going to be discussing this, but it mentions here that there was a situation where there was a former defense team member for Walid bin Atash gave a statement to the judge alleging rough surveillance. Now, this in and of itself is very interesting because what does that mean? Well, this is where we want to have a little bit of discussion. So why don't you say exactly what it was that he meant by that?
Right. Before this was presented, however, court was recessed almost immediately after it started at 09:28. So the courtroom started at 09:11, 9:11 a.m., which, this is a 9/11 proceeding. I think that's kind of coincidental. Anyways, session convened or started. And they actually ended at 09:28, which is 17 minutes later. So 09:11 to 09:28 is 17 minutes later. We know, if you're a Q follower, that the Q is the 17th letter in the alphabet. I thought that was kind of peculiar. So go ahead. You wanted me to read some of the transcripts in reference to that.
Yeah, let's go ahead and hear that.
Okay. Well, you know what? There was the attorney for one of the attorneys for Mr. Mohammed, Mr. David Nevin, Nevin. He thought there was a potential conflict of interest, and he wanted to bring it up to the judge's attention. Well, a former member, he describes as a former defense team member. Well, I did some research, and I found out that this former member was actually a sergeant in the Army, and he's a paralegal. And he was a defense team member for Walid bin Atash. And he alleged, Mr. Nevin alleged that this team member, the sergeant, was subjected to rough surveillance. According to a declaration by the sergeant in his Fort Hood, Texas neighborhood, the sergeant saw this guy filming with his cell phone. This sergeant gets in his car, and this person takes off. Well, the team member, the sergeant, follows that team member, and that person pulls over, and he gets out, and he runs between houses, and he disappears. He's a ghost. Well, the team member, the sergeant, takes off again, and then he soon realizes that he's being followed by another person in another car. So it's apparent at this point that there's a team of these people that are following him and watching him and surveilling him. He does, this team member, the sergeant, makes a U-turn, maybe in an attempt to lose his tail, maybe. Well, this tail follows him. Well, if you're I know from experience, if you're conducting a covert experience, you're not really going to blatantly turn around and follow them. You're going to have other team members pick up the tail. So it's obvious that that this person who's following him isn't doing it covertly or surreptitiously, I should say. He was doing it in a manner to make the sergeant acutely aware of the fact that he is being scrutinized. So the sergeant gets to his work, his Fort Meade. He gets to the gate, and he gets searched in an unusual and not typically in an unusual way, not typically done, involving 5 people including military police, as well as civilian law enforcement. He's interrogated by two people who identify themselves as FBI agents for 2.5 hours. They require his signature on a couple of the documents, and they keep ingratiating themselves, or attempting to ingratiate themselves with him. They attempt to suggest to him that they have common beliefs and experiences in an effort to get him to provide them with information and to cooperate with these FBI agents. They demonstrate, or they tell them that they're aware of specific procedures on the bin attach team, information that could have had just from observing from the outside, suggesting that they had someone from the inside providing information to them, either from the bin attach team or from another team. They're also aware of this sergeant's personal activities, his interest, his taste, where he goes on the internet, this kind of thing.
Which is kind of scary. And what is really of interest here is the defense team went out of their way to make this part of public record. They wanted everybody to know that this type of activity was going on. And this is only one situation. As we read on through quite a bit of the transcription, we'll find out that this type of thing has been going on for the last 10 years, not necessarily just with this particular defense team member, but many, many others in the past, and kind of scared quite a few of them off, and new ones would be replacing them. And so it was an ongoing intimidation process. Now, again, this is the defense team for the accused. So, on first glance, one might think, well, it makes sense because you want to make certain that whoever it is that is defending the accused is not out there getting, other supposed information, anything that would undermine.
Collaborating with the enemy.
And that makes sense. But then as you go on, and you will find, as you read through the transcriptions, it kind of makes you wonder, and just kind of makes you wonder if there are things that maybe they didn't want the defense team to find out, or actually report some of the things that they knew, where certain information, potential collaboration with the enemy to whomever knows whom. Now, let's talk about with quote unquote to whomever knows whom. How many of the individuals, agencies, were doing this type of behavior?
Well, by court transcripts, it's apparent that the CIA was involved, the FBI, also the military counterintelligence, as well as the Army counterintelligence. So you had 4 agencies working simultaneously in cooperation with each other. So this rough, what the defense counsel calls rough surveillance, it goes on. After 2.5 hours of interrogation, they require the sergeant to come back and subject himself to a polygraph. Well, he comes back the second day, and he actually goes through 2 polygraphs by 2 different people. One of them, they say he's just from another government agency, which is euphemistic speak, particularly in the context of this case for the CIA. They obviously don't want to reveal that they are CIA, so whenever you hear someone say they're from another agency, it's probably the CIA.
Mm-hmm. So if I remember correctly, and please correct me if my memory is wrong, but it wasn't only the CIA and the FBI, but it was Army and military counterintelligence. So we're talking about 4 agencies that are going through this rough surveillance, right, so to speak, over time.
Well, his whole point is this defense attorney, he tells the judge, this is what we used to call in the old days, it's called rough surveillance, and that's how I refer to it. It's not designated to acquire information, it's designated to intimidate. Just like we talked about before, if you do it covertly, you're gathering information about someone secretly. However, if you're doing it not covertly and you're making it obvious, then that follows. It's obvious you're not there for gathering information gathering mission, but obviously to make him know that he's being surveilled.
Oh, that's very true. And so we have situations going on here, as you will read through the transcripts that we are providing for you. More things to come. Now, we are dividing this particular video and also our report up into two pieces. We got a part 1 and a part 2. Part 1 today is because of day 1 on January 28, 2019. Now, it does obviously move forward to another day, which this was supposed to go on from January 28th to February 1st. That was how long the actual tribunals were supposed to last. That's how long we were going to be here to be able to observe live these tribunals through CCTV at Fort Meade in Maryland, which is right next to Washington, D.C. So with that being said, the second day, right at the end of the morning session, all of a sudden, the judge has an emergency medical situation to the point that he has to be airlifted off the island, off of GITMO. And so it was brought about through conversation with the wife of the judge that it was a retina detachment. Well,
let's save that for tomorrow.
Okay, so we won't get into that. But the point is, in part 2, we find out that because of this judge's emergency, the remaining part of the tribunals were put on hold. Now, why is this significant? That is what we are going to discuss tomorrow, because as you read ahead, you are going to find that they are trying very hard to close these tribunals. And they do not want the information brought out to the public, whether it's mainstream media or alternative media or whatever. They want it quiet. So, it's just something that we are all going to look at. We're going to scrutinize. Don't take our word for it. Don't take anyone's word for it. Read the transcriptions. That is the absolute fact, the straightforward truth. And from there, to make some determinations along with other things, what we find out, then we're going to have a closer glimpse of what is really going on.
Right. If you read the transcripts, it's kind of like a spy novel. I mean, it's got all the intrigue that you need: surveillance, betrayal. They talk about spies. They talk about moles. They talk about how the government inserted moles into their defense team, and how they tried to some of them betrayed them, how they tried to basically be a spy for the government, which is all legitimate investigative work, but it reads like a spy novel. Trust me.
Well, what's really interesting to me is, where is the meat of why we're here? We are here because these 5 individuals were orchestrators in one way, shape, form, or another to bring about one of the most horrific terror projects, however you want to put it, on 9/11/2001 that killed many, many people. And then there's ongoing, situations with that. So why aren't we getting to the meat? Why all this other peripheral BS, as far as I'm concerned? So tune in tomorrow for our next, discovery, our next discussion. And in the meantime, please go to c-vine.com. That's cvine.com.
That's c-vine.com.
Yes, to be able to read the articles that we post. And we are asking that everybody go to the Facebook page, which is C-Vine International News Network. It's a Facebook group, and this is where you can give your thoughts. You can give your reasonings and discuss. We want you to discuss. Even if it becomes a heated argument, as long as it is not...
It's done respectfully.
Yes.
And it's not offensive.
Correct. And, no trolls. We're going to shut you down. This is here to be able to get to the truth. So thank you for joining us today, and we will see you tomorrow.
See you next time. I don't know if it's up.